I called in a hurry after spotting a document on your desk that looked significant. Don't you need it today? Stephen, the manager who always seemed to single Emily out, was the one on the other end. Yeah, but didn't we just discuss handling documents with more care? In any case, it's probably too late now. He sounded like he had waited until he was certain it was too late for the meeting before making the call. I could picture his self-satisfied smirk, even though it was just his voice on the phone. Emily glanced at me at that point and hesitated before speaking. What should I do right now? Instantaneously interpreting such complicated issues. It could only be done by someone who speaks English well. Are you fluent in English? Mr. Nash's face suddenly brightened as if he had just experienced an epiphany. He murmured, "Emily," as she tilted her head slightly and gave him a curious look. "We have a fluent English speaker here." I looked into Mr. Nash's eyes. "Stephen, I need your help," he said, glancing right at me. "Stephen is my name. Although I never used to mind, my waist has gotten a little more visible now that I'm in my 40s. I work as a driver for the president of a home products firm at the moment. I drive to the president's house every morning and then drop him off at work or his appointments. It's difficult to stay on top of consumer demands in the rapidly evolving home goods industry. Recently, Toro Corporation, the firm I drive for, has received some attention on social media. It is well known in its sector, while not being a large player, and its performance has progressively improved with the rise of social media. The president I drive for, Mr. Nash, is roughly my age but maintains his physical fitness. He has a tall stature and a stylish manner. Once you meet him, it's difficult to forget his laid-back appeal. On the other side, even though it's generally from strangers, I frequently hear the comment, "You look familiar." To put it another way, I have a face that can fit in anywhere. Mr. Nash handed me a tiny wrapped surprise one day when I picked him up for his regular shift. "This is what, Mr. Nash?" "Take it. I got it from a client, but I don't need any more." A tiny golden cat figurine was inside when I opened it. As a man in my 40s, I wasn't sure what to do with it, even if it may look adorable on a desk. Regretfully, I don't even have a desk at work because I'm a driver. "Thank you, I guess. Try looking a bit more appreciative," Mr. Nash urged, raising an eyebrow at my hesitating response. "It is purportedly made of solid gold, by the way." What? I nearly dropped the cat figurine in shock. Mr. Nash, however, seemed amused by my response and laughed as he climbed into the automobile. I put the cat figurine carefully in my pocket and shut the rear door. Mr. Nash, like the majority of business presidents, has a secretary who handles the president's schedule and other duties. Mr. Nash is no different, and his secretary Emily is the one who goes with him the most in the business vehicle I drive. Emily is a talented, beautiful young woman who was selected as Mr. Nash's secretary early in her career. With a strong sense of responsibility, she anticipates tasks well in advance. Although she's quite reserved and not much of a talker, her quiet nature means she isn't the type to confront others, even when she overhears whispers about herself from colleagues. I haven't personally heard any comments, but rumor has it that Emily is disliked by her supervisor in the secretary department, Stephen. When Mr. Nash's former secretary retired, he personally chose Emily to take on the role. At the time, Stephen, who was an experienced senior secretary, probably didn't appreciate this decision, as Emily was a rookie with only about a year of experience at the company. I can understand Stephen's reasoning that someone with more experience should have the job, but he's still complaining even though it was Mr. Nash's own decision. At that time, Stephen was still an assistant manager, but he was later promoted to manager and took on the responsibility of overseeing the department. However, he seems to have a naturally persistent personality. He still appears to treat Emily rather harshly. Even though Emily is Mr. Nash's secretary, she doesn't stick to him constantly. She spends much of her time at her desk, handling office work. Working in an uncomfortable environment within her own department must be a big source of stress for her. Stephen often speaks to Emily in a harsh tone. Emily, being cautious, rarely makes big mistakes, but everyone slips up sometimes. Other colleagues would typically get off with a simple, "be careful next time," but only Emily is always criticized excessively by Stephen. Colleagues are too afraid to stand up for her, fearing that defending her might put them in Stephen's bad books. They'll chat with her when he's not around, but it seems no one is willing to shield her from him. That day, on the way to a client, Mr. Nash asked me to make a quick stop, so I pulled over. "Wait here a minute," he instructed, leaving me and Emily waiting in the car. Emily, usually so calm, looked somewhat down that day and sighed quietly. "Are you okay? You seem a bit tired." "Huh. Oh, is it that obvious?" When I spoke to her, Emily responded in a flustered manner. "Oh no. I didn't mean you looked tired, more like I just sensed it." I realized too late that mentioning her appearance might be rude and tried to cover it up. Do I really look that bad? Stephen had a lot to say to me earlier. Of course, Stephen was the reason. Did he give you a hard time again? Sometimes, like today, Mr. Nash leaves Emily and me in the car while he goes off to handle his own errands. During those times, I usually chat with Emily while we wait, and naturally, the conversation often turns to matters related to the secretary department. Emily's sighs are nearly always caused by Stephen. This morning, I was looking over the minutes from our meeting when Mr. Nash called me, so I left my seat. I just put the notes in my desk drawer. Emily, the president's secretary, always prioritizes the president above all in her work. She constantly puts her own administrative tasks on hold, which I think must be a tough job. Minutes are confidential, but I plan to file them in the cabinet as soon as I got back. She explained that Mr. Nash always keeps meetings brief, so even when called, she's not gone long. But even those brief moments don't escape Stephen's notice. "When you got back, was Stephen waiting for you?" "Yeah, it was barely a couple of minutes, but Stephen told me it doesn't matter if it's 1 minute or 2. I shouldn't have left those confidential documents outside the cabinet." I could almost picture Stephen's smug face. It's like he's on a mission to spot even the smallest of her mistakes. "But they were in your drawer, right? Leaving them out might be bad, but for a couple of minutes and with no one around. We rarely have outside visitors to our department. But even so, it wasn't the right thing to do. I know it was my fault, but when he keeps pushing, it really makes me down." It seems Stephen has made it his mission to never miss an opportunity to find fault with Emily. He's practically satisfied to make her feel small over the tiniest things. Maybe you should talk to Mr. Nash about it sometime. I doubt anyone in the department would dare call Stephen out on his attitude. I started to worry that if this situation continued, Emily might eventually reach her breaking point. No, I can't just bring something like this up to Mr. Nash. I just need to step up and work flawlessly so even Stephen can't find any faults. From what I could see, Emily handled her work exceptionally well, and I'd never seen Mr. Nash criticize her about anything. On the contrary, he was often quite proud when a client would compliment his assistant. Really? Well, if things do get out of hand, leaning on others could be an option. Better to avoid anything irreversible. You're right, but I'd still like to try a bit longer on my own. She gave me a smile as she said it. I wondered if I'd somehow pressured her into saying that, but honestly, all I could do at that moment was listen. "Got it. Just don't overdo it. Okay. Thank you." Just then, Mr. Nash returned to the car, having finished his errands. "Oh, Emily, do you have today's contract with Goodness?" Goodness was the industry's largest lifestyle goods manufacturer and clearly a market leader. They were about to launch a major project with Turo Corporation. Today was the day we head to Goodness headquarters for the contract signing. Yes, of course. I've never handled a $10 million deal before. It's definitely nerve-wracking. but as she rummaged through her bag, I saw her expression turn pale. Well, I have the English files. Emily? Excuse me, please give me a moment. Her tense tone changed the atmosphere in the car in an instant. She frantically overturned her bag, but it seemed that what she was looking for wasn't there. No way. I was sure I'd put it in here. Staring blankly into her bag, Emily's voice sounded dazed. Apparently, the critical documents for the $10 million deal were nowhere to be found. Even Mr. Nash looked momentarily speechless in shock. But at the same time, I wondered, would someone as meticulous as Emily really make such a mistake? I'd watched Emily and Mr. Nash head off to meetings like this several times, and nothing like this had ever happened before. Emily, being as responsible as she was, always said she'd double-check her bag to avoid any slip-ups. Yet, I'd reminded myself that Emily was only human, so mistakes are possible. As I thought back to our earlier conversation, Stephen's face came to mind. But even if he disliked her, could he really sabotage such a crucial company project? When's the meeting scheduled? I turned to ask, and she replied, looking paler than ever. It's at 1 p.m., but we're not going to make it back in time. The clock showed 12:30. There was no way we'd make it back to the office in time. Emily looked at Mr. Nash with tears in her eyes. Mr. Nash, I lost the critical file. Oh boy. English isn't my strong suit at all. Mr. Nash held his head in his hands as Emily lowered her gaze, still pale. I do have the Japanese documents, but they said the overseas division would be there today. Apparently, this project with Goodness was an international collaboration. Emily mentioned $10 million earlier, which would make this Toro Corporation's first international deal. Naturally, we didn't want to risk such a significant project failing. Yeah, I just don't think I can explain all this contract information fluently in English. Mr. Nash glanced at the Japanese version of the contract. Interpreting all this complex information on the spot, only someone fluent in English could pull it off. Fluent in English? Wait, hold on. Suddenly, Mr. Nash looked as if he had an idea and lifted his head. Emily. She glanced at him, tilting her head in confusion. Emily, we have someone fluent in English right here. I met Mr. Nash's gaze. He looked directly at me and spoke, "Scene, I need you to do this." What? Wait, what are you talking about? In my shock, I momentarily forgot that I was Mr. Nash's driver. Come on, you can handle this, right? Mr. Nash clasped his hands in front of him, practically bowing as if asking to borrow some class notes. You can't just spring this on me. Why me, anyway? I shook my head in disbelief, but Mr. Nash leaned toward me in the driver's seat, practically pleading. This is the company's future on the line. It's a $1 million deal. His eyes were serious, but I couldn't just agree that easily. After all, I was just the driver. Now, don't put a $10 million deal on the shoulders of the driver. You know, I've been out of practice. Mr. Nash was right. I used to be good at English, but that was back in my student days, and I hadn't used it since starting this job. I know, but you can do it. You were part of all those debates in supervision, right? Supervision. That was ages ago. Hearing that word brought back old memories, and I felt myself starting to drift back to my college days. I couldn't fall for it. This was exactly what Mr. Nash wanted. Wait a minute. What's going on here? Emily, who had been left out of the loop, looked between us wide-eyed. Just then, her phone rang. Oh, it's the office. Excuse me, I need to take this. While Emily took the call, Mr. Nash and I continued to whisper back and forth, me saying no way and him pleading, please wait, hold on. Suddenly, Emily raised her voice, and both Mr. Nash and I turned to look at her, noticing something unusual. Mr. Nash whispered to Emily, put it on speaker, while continuing the conversation. Emily switched the phone to speaker mode. I'm sure I put it in my bag. I even double-checked. I didn't leave it on my desk. Oh well, I just happened to notice some important-looking papers on your desk and thought I'd give you a call. You sure you won't be needing them today? The voice on the line was indeed Stephen's. Yes, but we just talked about handling important documents, didn't we? Although I'm sure it's all too late by now. It was as if he had waited until he was sure we wouldn't make it in time to call. Even over the phone, I could practically see the smug look on his face. That's when Emily glanced at me, her words faltering. What was I supposed to do here? What do you intend to do about this colossal mistake, huh? Did you think you could still stay on as the president's secretary after this? Stephen's tone was sharp and cutting. I swear I put it in my bag. Enough already. It wasn't in there, was it? If it were, you wouldn't be in this mess right now. Emily flinched at his harsh tone. Was she used to being reprimanded like this all the time? You're finished acting all high and mighty just because you're the president's secretary, and as a newbie no less. Aren't you embarrassed carrying around a childish bag like that as an adult? Emily was startled and then reached for a small pouch scattered on the back seat. The contents of her bag were still strewn around from when she'd been searching for the document. She gripped it tightly, trying to hide it from Mr. Nash. It looked as if she had had it for years. So immature tastes lead to immature work, huh? We don't need someone who makes these kinds of mistakes in the executive assistant team. Stephen's mocking laughter echoed through the phone. The cruel remarks made me want to cover my ears. But then it hit me. How did Stephen know what was inside Emily's bag? Judging by Emily's reaction, I wondered if this pouch was something she usually kept hidden away, tucked safely in her bag. It confirmed my suspicion that Stephen was involved in the document's disappearance. I was now certain of it. He must have taken the file when Emily left her desk momentarily. For Mr. Nash, a small pouch like this wouldn't have been visible unless someone peeked inside her bag. Emily remained silent, looking down with a face that seemed on the verge of tears. She didn't just look discouraged from having her mistake pointed out. It was the kind of sadness you see when something precious has been belittled. I couldn't stand the thought of seeing her look so defeated any longer. If I wanted to stop Stephen's tirade, there was only one way. Forget the document. I'll accompany you to the meeting and handle the English. Just moments before, I wouldn't have believed I'd say something like that. Emily looked up, startled, while Mr. Nash pumped his fist in a triumphant yes. Thank you, scene. Here's the Japanese version of the document. As Mr. Nash handed me the file, I gave him a hesitant look and quickly skimmed through it, but there was no time. With only minutes left, I'd have to translate on the spot during the meeting. I told you I'm rusty. And now I have to translate something this complicated. I let out my frustration, but Mr. Nash didn't seem fazed in the slightest. Then Emily suddenly exclaimed, "Oh." I was so startled that I accidentally hung up the call. I couldn't help but wonder what Stephen's face must have looked like when he realized the call had ended without warning. He had no idea who'd spoken up in my place. I felt a pang of doubt. Could I really pull this off for Emily's sake? The only real experience I had was from my student days, and it had been years since I'd used English regularly. Even though I had some work experience with it back then, I couldn't just leave Emily to deal with Stephen's petty schemes alone. It reminded me too much of myself back then. I, too, had once believed that I had to handle everything on my own without relying on anyone. In the end, I'd failed. I didn't want Emily to make the same mistake. As I was desperately recalling all the English I could muster while staring at the documents, Mr. Nash cut through my thoughts. It's time, Stephen. He stepped out of the car confidently and strode into Goodness headquarters. He greeted the receptionist with an easy familiarity, making small talk as he led the way. Watching him walk ahead, I felt a strange sense of nostalgia. His back seemed to say, "I don't doubt for a second that you'll do this." Ever since I'd known him, Mr. Nash had always placed his trust in others so easily, and somehow that trust made me feel like I could do it too. I'd always thought he was suited to be a leader, even back in the day, and here he was, actually becoming a president. How many years has it been since Tyler Nash and I first met? Back in high school, before he became president, we were attending a well-known college preparatory school in the area and became friends after being seated near each other in class. Tyler was tall and lean, with a laid-back attitude and an easy charm that made him popular with the girls. Meanwhile, I was a smart student but not particularly social at the time, so people often asked him, "Why are you friends with Stephen?" Each time, he'd reply, "Stephen's amazing. He has a unique perspective." He always spoke well of me. At first, I thought he was just teasing, but he genuinely seemed to believe it. He even listened earnestly to my then ridiculous dreams without a hint of judgment. There was a famous economist who was well known for America's New Deal, John Maynard Keynes. Reading his works had sparked my interest in economics, and I started dreaming of studying at Cambridge, where Keynes himself had gone. I've always liked studying, and my grades were good. However, deciding to seriously apply to Cambridge University was a whole different story. There were excellent schools in Japan to study economics, so some might think it wasn't necessary to go all the way to England. Even if I made it into Cambridge after all that effort, I didn't have any clear plans for what I would do afterward. My only motivation was wanting to study in the same environment as Keynes. I had spent a year in a British boarding school during middle school, so I had no trouble with everyday English. But competing with the world's best students would require real resolve. With nothing but this trendy motivation, I didn't think I'd get very far. When I told Tyler about it, though, his eyes lit up as he said, "That's awesome." Annoyed, I snapped, "Don't just say that offhand." But he repeated himself, "You should go for it. Easy for you to say. You can do it." He looked at me with an unwavering gaze. Even as the top student in my class, I knew Cambridge wasn't going to be easy. It's the kind of highly competitive university where, even if I threw everything aside to focus on studying, I'd still have a higher chance of failing. By the way, what was your ranking on the last test? I think I was about 30th from the bottom. Tyler was one of those naturally quick thinkers who could do well if he studied, but I'd never seen him put in real effort. He liked to coast along, as he put it, staying comfortably at the lower ranks. If you told me you wanted to aim for Tokyo University because of your hero, Kurt Thompson, I'd probably stop you. Who's Kurt Thompson? That's not the point. He laughed, then gave me a serious look again. I'd support you, though. His direct gaze startled me, and I found myself looking away. Are you crazy? Aiming for Cambridge? Why would you go abroad? What are you trying to prove? Not only did he not mock my ambitions like that, but he even said, "I'll support you." I was so moved by his words that I felt embarrassed and couldn't look up. Hey, are you blushing? Shut up. I stood up abruptly and dashed out of the classroom. My heart was pounding, and I felt like I could do anything. Maybe it sounds foolish, but Tyler's encouragement gave me the motivation to start preparing for Cambridge. With me studying hard by his side, he suddenly decided, "All right, I'll aim for Tokyo University then," and to my amazement, he got in. I remember feeling a bit intimidated by his potential. I'd also managed to pass the Cambridge entrance exam, and since no one from our school had ever been admitted, the entire school was in an uproar. It's often said that graduating from a university overseas is harder than getting accepted, and that certainly felt true. I thought I had studied the hardest during entrance exam preparation, but once I entered university, the challenges were far greater. But that's Cambridge University, known as one of the highest-ranking institutions internationally. Students come from all over the world, bringing diverse perspectives and ideas. In addition to regular lectures, Cambridge offers supervision, small group sessions of 1 to 3 students. These sessions focus on deeply exploring specialized topics, and preparing for them was no easy task. Just keeping up with the daily classes was a struggle, and letting my guard down even a little meant I'd fall behind. I spent countless days buried in the historic library, absorbed in books. A tough but incredibly stimulating experience. I'd attended the same university as Keynes and studied economics. At first, that alone was enough for me. But as I talked about future dreams with others studying economics, I began to get a clearer picture of what I wanted to do. While some aimed to work in consulting or start businesses abroad, I felt a strong desire to apply what I learned here back in Japan. I thought that working as a government official in a central ministry might be a way to contribute to Japanese society. With that goal, I graduated from Cambridge University aiming for a career in the civil service. But from this point on, my life took an unexpected turn. For the first few years after joining the ministry, I was so busy that I'd barely have any memory of that time in the bureaucracy. There's a career rotation system where you're transferred every 2 to 3 years. I transferred about 3 times, and although the workload was relentless, I managed to avoid conflicts within each department. However, unlike my student days when effort could overcome most challenges, I soon realized that relationships between people aren't something that can be solved through hard work alone. In my new department, I began struggling with my interactions with a senior official. Even in the ministry, the hierarchy between bosses and subordinates, as well as seniors and juniors, is much like that of a typical company. Each department had many capable senior officials, but there was one person I just couldn't get along with. While I could take constructive criticism, this person frequently interfered with my personal life. He mocked my personality and mannerisms as if they were something to laugh at. At first, I tried to go along without causing trouble, but the continuous pressure of long hours and unrelenting work began to wear me down mentally and physically. His words were like small, constant pricks to my heart. If it had been only once, I could have brushed it off, but the accumulation over time became painful. As I endured, the wounds grew deeper, and the pain became unbearable. Working in the central ministry, being at the heart of the government, was as busy as one would expect. During parliamentary sessions, every ministry is overwhelmed. My department was no exception, and late nights became the norm. One day, I collapsed during work. My mind and body had reached their limit, and that was the end of my career. It was my 10th year in the ministry. After 10 years of relentless work and mental anguish, I had finally reached a point where I couldn't continue. In hindsight, it was my first experience of failure in life. Fortunately, after a short rest, my physical health improved significantly, but healing my mind was a much harder task. Studying had always been manageable, and I had friends who understood me. I used to think I could push through anything if I tried hard enough, but this experience made me realize there are limits. As I sat in the hospital, gazing out the window, wondering what to do next after quitting my job, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my friend Tyler. We had stayed in touch over the years, reaching out about once a year since high school. Recently, we had both been too busy to meet, but reading his familiar, quirky writing from high school warmed my heart. "I'm in the hospital now. I collapse," I wrote. "Watch yourself," he replied. When I replied honestly about my situation, Tyler, usually so nonchalant, rushed over to the hospital, visibly concerned. Upon seeing me, he looked relieved and said, "Hey, you look fine." As we enjoyed the reunion, I shared the story of my resignation and the heavy thoughts I was carrying. Tyler listened intently. "I've always liked having a goal to work toward, but now I have nothing." It felt as if there was a hole in my heart, draining away all my motivation and energy. I had never experienced anything like it before. "Then maybe you don't need to do anything right now," Tyler said in his usual laid-back way. "That might be true, but I can't just keep doing nothing forever," I sighed. Tyler suddenly looked as if he had an idea. "So, how about being a driver?" "A driver? Like for a taxi?" "No, my own personal driver." I realized I hadn't asked him about his recent life, and it turned out Tyler had become a president. He always seemed suited for leadership, but to think that the same guy who was near the bottom in high school tests had become the head of a company with many employees was surprising to say the least. And so, I became Mr. Nash's driver. When we entered the conference room, the employees from Goodness were already gathered. Mr. Nash greeted the person who seemed to be the head of their international division in English. I thought to myself, so he can speak English after all. As I introduced myself and the meeting began, since I'd only had a brief moment to glance over the documents, I translated on the fly, pushing my mind to its limits. There were some rough spots, but my English seemed to get the message across, and the negotiation progressed smoothly, ending with a contract. We secured a $10 million deal. Emily watched the entire exchange, mouth agape, listening to my English. Scene, that was amazing. When we returned to the car, Emily, still excited, spoke to me as I settled into the driver's seat. "Oh, thanks. I'm just glad it worked out. Phew, that was a relief." As I translated my hardest in the meeting, Mr. Nash had just sat back, seemingly calm, which had me wondering if he'd ever felt nervous at all. The confidence was almost irritating. He trusts me a bit too much. "I'm heading back to the office, but next time, it's your turn," I hinted about Emily and Stephen. Mr. Nash nodded and said, "I know handling things like this is part of my job. I was planning to handle things with Stephen on my own. It's my responsibility that things escalated this way. I'm very sorry." Emily bowed deeply toward Mr. Nash. "I know," she said. I'd advised her not to carry this all alone. Watching Emily, I saw a bit of my past self. If you keep holding it in, there's only so much you can bear before hitting your limit. You have to reach out before it comes to that. I hadn't been able to lean on anyone, but I didn't want Emily to end up like me. Don't worry, thanks to Stephen, it didn't turn into the worst-case scenario. Right? Tyler said proudly, as if it were his achievement. "Well, you did help me pick my college back then." Mr. Nash didn't miss the words I muttered under my breath. "Ha, thanks to me? Did I do something?" "Shut up. It's nothing." Too embarrassed to explain further, I turned back to the driver's seat. "Come on, tell me." Emily, unable to contain herself, burst into laughter at Mr. Nash's clueless tone. Her bright laughter filled the car. When Mr. Nash summoned Stephen, he hadn't realized that his exchanges with Emily had reached Mr. Nash's ears. He practically fell to the ground in shock. "I'm so sorry." Stephen bowed so low his head almost hit the floor, even though it didn't go all the way. As a company, we couldn't ignore the potential damage Stephen had attempted to cause. "Instead of apologizing to me, there's someone else you need to apologize to first." When Stephen timidly lifted his head, he found Emily standing right in front of him. Mr. Nash?" Having to admit defeat to someone he looked down on for being a newcomer and lacking experience, it was hard to imagine a greater humiliation for Stephen. "I'm sorry." Just as he stammered out the words, his shoulders shaking, Mr. Nash spoke firmly. "I can't hear you." "I am very sorry." Seeing the usually calm Mr. Nash raise his voice, Stephen seemed too stunned to even be confused. Emily told me excitedly that she had never seen Mr. Nash like that before. As for Emily's pouch, the very thing that had led to her catching on to Stephen's schemes, she later explained that to me herself. Surprisingly, Emily was known for forgetting things a lot. As a child, her mother had given her that well-worn pouch as a charm, saying, "Keep this with you to help you remember." Ever since then, Emily somehow stopped forgetting things. Now, even though it's mostly for luck, she feels a bit uneasy without it. "It's so worn out now that I wouldn't want anyone to see it. It's just a charm," Emily said, holding it tightly with a hint of embarrassment yet with clear affection. As for Stephen, he was transferred to a different department. After years of dominating the secretary division, his new role had nothing in common with the secretarial duties, so he was struggling, not knowing where to start. Now he's being taught by younger employees and even talked about behind his back as useless. The other day, I spotted him eating lunch alone in the cafeteria, looking rather forlorn. My days felt like a long vacation. Though outwardly I was Mr. Nash's driver, all I had been doing was giving a friend a lift. It's not that I thought driving was easy, but stepping into a completely different line of work gave me a fresh perspective and sparked a desire to take on something new. "I'll need to find a new driver," Mr. Nash said as I opened the back door. Today was my last day giving him a lift. "You'll find someone in no time." "So, have you decided what you're doing next?" "Yeah, an old friend from my time in England reached out recently. Strangely enough, a friend from college contacted me after years. He offered me a chance to work together on a project. A year ago, I probably would have turned it down without a second thought, but I'm sure that successfully closing that high-stakes deal the other day played a role in shifting my mindset. Being in that intense atmosphere felt like it unlocked something within me. "So, you're going back to England?" "Yeah, I think he'll be good to visit after all this time. It's a startup, so it looks promising. I can look forward now. It's thanks to Mr. Nash, who reached out when I was at my lowest. I don't quite know how to thank him, and it's a bit embarrassing to say too much." "You're excited, aren't you?" "Well, yeah. When you're like this, things usually turn out fine," Mr. Nash said, laughing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You've got this." It was exactly what I needed to hear, the words that would keep me going more than any others. With those words, I felt like I could face any challenges that lay ahead. "Thanks." As I turned around and spoke softly, Mr. Nash didn't miss a word. "What was that?" Annoyed by his teasing grin, I gave him a hard pat on the back to cover my embarrassment. "Well, I'm short-staffed over there. Mind if I recruit Emily?" "Absolutely not." Today marked the end of our relationship as driver and boss, but our bond would remain unchanged from here on. Imagining the bright futures that awaited us, we set out on our own paths.
My sister is beautiful and talented, while I am completely ordinary. We were never treated equally by our parents. Escaping from parents who offered no love seemed only natural. Yet, 10 years later, those same parents reappeared before me. Disheveled, screaming, "Why didn't you tell us?" My name is Kristen. I'm a 16-year-old high school student from an ordinary family. My father is an office worker and my mother a homemaker. It seems like a case of a hawk being born from a buzzard because Abby, my younger sister by 2 years, is stunningly beautiful. Likely a throwback to a very beautiful ancestor on our mother's side. Her beauty is my parents' pride. Moreover, Abby is very intelligent. At 14, she's already settled from being called a prodigy at a younger age. Yet her academic performance remains outstanding, always topping her middle school classes. This, of course, only elevates our parents' pride. However, recently their favoritism toward Abby has intensified. It started to show when she began middle school, but now it's worse than ever. While it's fine for parents to dote on their daughter, the disparity between how they treat me, another daughter, is too great. Abby is so adorable that we bought her branded clothes, my mother would say cheerfully. But when she turns to look at me, her smile vanishes instantly. "Do you want new clothes because you've grown taller?" Don't joke around, we're not a wealthy family. If it's just a bit of growth, you can adjust the hem and wear it. I absolutely won't buy clothes for you. Fix them yourself, she would say. When my clothes finally wear out beyond repair, I might get new ones, but only from a thrift store focusing on cheapness. The difference in how we are treated doesn't stop there. My parents take Abby out with them, while I'm left to house sit. The same goes for vacations. I'm always told, you stay home and do the chores. Even Abby tries to include me by saying, what about sister? But my mother just smiles and tells her, no. Kristen needs to study because she doesn't perform as well in school. My father also said, that's right. Abby isn't just beautiful, she's also kind. To worry about her failed sister like that, and laughed at his misguided joke. I was allowed to attend high school, but of course, it had to be a public one. My uniform was a hand-me-down from someone my parents knew. And all my school supplies and bag were second-hand bargains. While school life is enjoyable, I can't afford to hang out with friends after school because I don't get any allowance and can't work part-time. I have house chores to do. As parents dote on Abby entering high school. They told me, we let you go to school in exchange for doing the chores. That means I handle all the housework. My homemaker mother does nothing while I shop with limited money, clean, and cook after school. She just watches TV and laughs, telling me to be quiet if I try to speak to her. After dinner, I'm ordered to stay in my room as if they wish to be a happy family of 3, excluding me. What kind of happy family is this? Am I not a part of the family? Mostly ignored and barely spoken to, I'm treated more like a maid. It seems there's no place for me in this house anymore. Perhaps there's no point in staying. It would have been better if I could have claimed abuse. But while there's no physical violence, I'm provided with the basics of food, clothing, and shelter, so how much understanding could I expect? Talking about it would likely only make things worse. So, must I just endure? There's a term junior caregiver. But how many kids are forced to care for perfectly healthy and able parents? As I wash dishes in cold water in the middle of winter, being told not to use hot water, tears well up in my eyes. Yet, as a child, I still hope for my parents' affection. After finishing the housework and returning to my room, I study late into the night, pushing myself to do better. Unlike Abby, who grasps things quickly, I need more time to understand, thus, I spend all my available time studying, hoping that good grades would make my parents happy. And they would finally see me, not just Abby. But such hopes shattered with the first test of my sophomore year. I did it. Holding the paper with my rank on the first term exams of my sophomore year. I trembled. I'm first. Our high school isn't low level, quite the contrary. Many graduates go on to top universities. Being first in such a school is a significant achievement. This will make Dad and Mom recognize me. Overjoyed, I showed my mother the results when I got home. Mom, look. I got first place in the exams. But. What? It doesn't matter, go clean and do the laundry. What? It doesn't matter. Those words dashed my elated spirits as if doused with cold water. But Mom, you always said, get first place then you can be like Abby. You'll be treated like her. She interrupted before I could finish. I don't care about that. Do you think you and your ugly self are the same as cute Abby? What? It doesn't matter what your grades are, in the face of Abby's beauty, they're irrelevant. First, there's beauty, and because Abby has good grades on top of that. She's our perfect daughter. But I'm also your daughter. Tears welled up in my eyes, but my mother wouldn't look at them, wouldn't even try. No matter how hard you try, you'll never measure up to Abby. Be thankful you can attend school, live in a house, and have food to eat. Now go do the chores without slacking off. At that moment, it felt as though the ground beneath me crumbled. What? Why do I have to be treated like this? If I'm ugly, then it's because of you too. That night, when my father came home, it got even worse. What? First place? So what? He said, tearing up the paper with my grades. Oh, how ugly, the futile struggle of an ugly daughter. You know, we don't even want to spend a penny on you. You should be thankful we're even doing that much. Doing the house chores is your role. It's terrible, Dad. What's so terrible? My despair deepened as my father added insult to injury. What value do you even have? If you want us to acknowledge you as a daughter, then start making money now. If not, at least do the household chores properly. And once you graduate from high school, get a job and hand over your entire salary to us. What? Stunned and wide-eyed, I couldn't comprehend what was being said to me. But my father just grinned slyly. I'm telling you to support us properly. Make sure you take care of us until the very end, okay? Maybe, just before I pass away, I might acknowledge you as a daughter. Saying this, my father headed towards the bath. And I could hear my mother laughing behind him. At that moment, I understood everything. It was hopeless. These parents. They were beyond saving. There was no value in staying with them. Understood. I said simply, then secretly slipped out. And made a call from a public phone to my maternal grandparents. After that, I went back to my room, packed my bags, and prepared to leave. Thanks for, well, actually, you never did help. Goodbye. I had only really received care when I was a baby. As I grew up, my parents never saw me, never treated me as their daughter. In the end, I was just a maid to them. What reason was there to stay attached to this house? My grandparents must have had an idea. Without asking for details, they immediately told me to come over. I thought about speaking to Abby before I left, but decided against it. She wasn't aware of everything that was happening. And she would be shocked once I was gone. But it would be sad for her if she got into trouble with our parents because of me. It was better for her to continue being adored as she had been. At least I wanted her to live happily. So, I left the house without saying a word. Laughter from the TV and our parents filled the living room as I left. I left home and walked away without looking back. No one was there to see me off. The grandparents I hadn't seen in years were surprised, but welcomed me with smiles. Apparently, there had been some falling out with my mother, leading almost to estrangement, which is why we never visited my grandparents' house. When I explained my situation, they were shocked and even offered to call my parents to talk it over. But I refused. There was no room for discussion anymore. There could be no reconciliation with that house. I couldn't forgive them anymore. Understanding my resolve, my grandparents welcomed me in. The days that followed were full of surprises for me. You don't need to do the housework, I'm still young enough to handle it. My grandmother would say, taking over the chores. I only helped occasionally. A student's duty is to study, but enjoying your youth is also important. My grandfather would say as he gave me some allowance, which allowed me to hang out with friends after school or during holidays. I came home to a warm bath and delicious dinner. Normal days, normal yet not so normal days. Ordinary, yet filled with happiness. Above all, my grandparents saw me. They would pat my head and praise me. Kristen is also our very cute granddaughter, they would say with a smile. Their love was what made me happiest and motivated me. Previously, I had worked hard hoping to be acknowledged by my parents, and to prove something to them, but now it was different. I was working hard for my grandparents, for the people I wanted to repay. This effort bore fruit, and I went on to college. And then landed a job in a fairly large company, leading a smooth-sailing life. Before I knew it, I was 26, 10 years since I had left my parents' house. Living independently from my grandmother's house, I was busy with work. The days at my parents' house felt like a distant past, almost fading from memory. But then something happened that reminded me of those times. One day, I received a call from my grandmother that shocked me. "Huh, Mom and Dad are there?" Apparently, my parents had suddenly shown up at my grandparents' house. Despite not worrying about me or contacting me in the 10 years since I left. They're demanding that Kristen come out. What should we do? Understood, I'll be right there. I didn't know what they intended by showing up now. But I didn't want them to trouble my grandparents. I asked my boss for permission to leave early and hurried to my grandparents' house. "I'm home." As I entered the house and saw the figures sprawled on the living room sofa, I couldn't help but yell, "What are you doing here?" I wanted to remain calm. But I couldn't help but feel my blood boil. Yet, as I was about to lose my cool, my mother stood up and confronted me screaming, "Kristen, why didn't you tell us?" That shockingly shifted me back to calmness. Because my parents had changed too much. Mom, what happened to you?" In just 10 years, my mother, who should have been in her early 50s, had hair completely white and was heavily wrinkled. My father seemed to have lost much of his hair. They looked older than my grandparents. Surprised, my father yelled, "It's your fault." My fault? How could it be my fault when we haven't seen each other for 10 years? Once, I would have shrunk under my parents' scolding and apologized immediately. They probably expected the same reaction. But instead of cowering, I glared back, and for a moment, they flinched. "Ah, you're still as unappealing as ever." "Thanks. I'd be nauseous if you thought I was cute." That took them by surprise. Their eyes widened in astonishment. In that funny moment of shock, my mother snapped back to reality and accused me. "You're acting all high and mighty. But it's your fault our lives are ruined. Take responsibility." "What are you talking about?" "They claim to be living in poverty now." "Why?" "What happened to Dad's company?" "It went under last year because of the recession." "Oh, that's unfortunate. You're in a decent company, aren't you? Support us with your salary." "No, thank you." "That's right, support us, huh? What did you say?" Perhaps they thought I would comply as usual. When I repeated no, thank you, my father had to ask again. "Oh, you. Have you forgotten the debt of being raised by us?" My mother attacked, but I retorted. "A debt of being raised? I was the one doing all the housework. It feels more like I raised you." With that, even my mother was left speechless. Her eyes bulging in disbelief. "You're both still in your 50s, right? You can work. Work at this point. Thinking you can live comfortably after unemployment? That's naive." "What?" My strong words made my father flinch. "What about Abby? What happened to the beautiful, talented daughter you adored?" Yeah, that's right, that." "What now? Do you know where Abby is?" "What?" "She ran away from us." That's when I understood everything. "Huh, so your precious daughter dumped you?" I sneered, and then my mother came at me again. "Why didn't you tell us?" Asking the same thing again. "Tell you what?" That Abby was only outstanding because of you. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. She told us that her being outstanding was thanks to her big sister. When she failed her exams and we blamed her, she said it was because the sister who used to help her wasn't there anymore. So, she finally told the truth. And you devils who drove her big sister away, you glare at us, huh? Then the conversation stopped, and just when she finally got a job and was about to start bringing money home, she disappeared days ago. She even quit her job, and we have no idea where she is. That's right. Abby's beauty might be thanks to our ancestors, but her academic success was a different story. Though my parents and I didn't get along, my relationship with my sister wasn't bad. In fact, it was quite good. We didn't show it much in front of our awful parents, but at night, she often came to my room. We talked about all sorts of trivial things, and I tutored her in her studies. I wasn't quick to catch on, so I had to study hard to understand things, which made me good at teaching. Thanks to me, Abby's grades were always at the top. But everything changed when I left home. Not only could I no longer tutor her, but the shock of my departure made her grades plummet. She barely made it into a decent high school. I heard she managed to get a job, but I asked about something that bothered me. What did you do with Abby's salary when she got a job? We took all of it, of course. All the money we'd poured into that girl was for that purpose. My mother replied as if it were the most natural thing. I couldn't even sigh, I was so appalled. If she couldn't make it into a top company, at least she could have gone into show business and made some money. But she totally rejected that idea. Such a waste of her beauty. Well, who would want to enter an industry knowing they'd be exploited by their parents? What did you say? My words made my mother glare at me, so I glared right back. She faltered instantly. How weak. Why was I ever afraid of someone like this? I had been brainwashed, after all. And I was just a child. But I'm not afraid anymore. Saying that, I stepped closer to my mother. Now it was my turn. How does it feel to be abandoned by your children? What are you? You knew, didn't you? That you never really loved us. Not me and not even Abby. She ran away because she knew. What are you saying? Think about it. Have you ever told your daughter you loved her? Treating her like she's just a cute toy or a pet, who would feel real love from that? I shouted with a fierce look, and my parents were speechless. Is pampering all you think love is? Oppressing the older sister and adoring the younger. Who would think such a situation is normal? Only someone as abnormal as you. Don't force your twisted views on us. We are individuals, thinking and living our own lives, not tools for your convenience. Ah. Pressed by my intensity, my mother fell over, and my father plopped down too. No money because you're unemployed? Sell the house, it'll fetch some money. That's already been seized for our debts. Serve you right. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. So now you're living in a shabby apartment? Yes, that's right. But that's about to end too, now that you'll support us. Just as my mother was about to say that I should parasite off me since Abby was no good, I was about to shout back when enough. My grandfather, who had been silent until then, shouted. How selfish can you be? Children are not tools for their parents. I did not raise you to be this way. He glared at my mother, who recoiled. What, Dad, you were always so harsh on me. You went down the wrong path despite that. Yes, I failed in raising you. But children can grow up without parents. I'm proud to see such a fine granddaughter grown from such a parent as you. My failure is redeemed by her. You don't even deserve to be in this house. No way. Even my father's anger left my mother without words, and she fell back. I crouched down to their pale faces. Never show up in front of me again. Ah. If you do, be prepared next time. Prepared, what do you mean? Remember what you did to me, and expect payback. What? My parents had once been such terrifying figures. But now they were completely fallen, devoid of any dignity. It's hard to believe I was ever afraid of such insignificant people. If you come again, I'll call the police, so be prepared. With my final words, my parents, pale-faced, rushed out of my grandparents' house. What happened to them afterwards, I don't know. Rumors say they got into trouble because of debts they shouldn't have taken on. But whatever that trouble was, it's probably best left unthought of. I have no intention of delving into the dark world I don't know. Nor do I have any sympathy for my parents. After hearing about their fate, I made a phone call to a certain person. Hello, big sis? Hey Abby, how's it going? Yeah. You sound good too, sis. The voice on the other end of the phone was my sister's. There was an odd pause in the conversation, given that she was overseas. How's everything there? Are you managing okay? Yeah, I've settled in completely. Thanks for helping me out, sis. What, anything for my cute little sister? Yes, my sister is now living abroad. I had known for a long time that our father's company had gone bankrupt. Because she told me. After moving in with my grandparents, I had reconnected with her. Occasionally, she came to my grandparents' house, and I helped her with her studies. Thanks to that, even though her grades had once dropped, she managed to get through college and even landed a job. Our parents didn't know about this. When our father's company went under, I told her to escape from our parents. We were children once and couldn't have survived on our own. I couldn't ask our elderly grandparents to take care of another person. So, my sister just managed to stay out of harm's way at home until she found a job. But she had been planning her escape all along. My father's unemployment was a good opportunity, I think. She had always known that our parents' love was never genuine. Fed up with parents who only cared about their own appearances, she took my advice. She quit the job she had taken just as a stopgap and went overseas to pursue the job she truly wanted. I helped her with the arrangements without letting our parents know, and provided some financial support. Everything was done secretly, under the radar. My sister, who had been parasitized under the guise of parental doting, had finally gained her freedom. When I told her about our parents' current situation, she just said I see, without any emotional fluctuation. That's what payback for false love looks like. Thanks, big sis. Come visit me sometime. Yeah, one day. The sister who used to cry about how hard it was at home is no more. The sister who lamented the phony affection is now embracing happiness. I love you, big sis. With words of genuine, familial love, I replied with a smile, I love you too.
Harry and I are embarking on a glamorous celebrity lifestyle overseas, thanks to his $3 million fortune. I fear I won't be able to endure if we remain together and end up divorcing. Do you want to know our address? Well, you'll have to lick my shoes first. Wait, what? I'm utterly confused. I couldn't decipher a single word of what my mother-in-law was trying to convey. There's been no indication of her making any preparations for a life abroad or saving money. So, as I was saying, Harry got his hands on $3 million. We're set for a lavish life overseas, just the two of us. Why would my husband Harry go abroad, and what's this about $3 million? Why are you so curious? Well, if you're desperate to know, maybe if you lick my shoes and beg, I might tell you. What kind of thing is that to say? Where's Harry? We're living the high life with Harry's $3 million. You're no longer needed. I was stunned by Dorothy's words. How could Harry suddenly acquire $3 million and talk about living luxuriously abroad so frivolously, as if I were an outsider? My heart was filled with anger and anxiety, but I needed to stay calm and understand the situation. How on earth did Harry come into such a fortune? Could that $3 million possibly be? I'm Emily. I work as a manager at a major IT company. I met Harry in the same department and was drawn to his bright personality, leading to our marriage. In the beginning, Harry's parents warmly welcomed me. Our daughter, Rothy, is now 14. I grew up in poverty with parents who were a bad influence. Having faced tough times, I'm committed to raising Rothy with deep love, balancing work and home life. But then Harry was assigned to a project in a remote area and had to go there alone. I'm worried about living with Rothy without you, I said. It's tough managing work, household, and Rothy. I've got an idea. Let's have Mom come over to help with chores and childcare. That might be a relief. That's how I agreed to live with Mom. When will Dad come back? Rothy asked. He'll be in the countryside for a while, but don't worry. Grandma's coming to stay with us, I reassured her. And so, Mom moved into our house. Little did I know that this decision would become my biggest regret. You're working late again today. This is why women who don't care about their families. Dorothy's words hit me like a dagger as soon as I returned home from work. I have a job too, and I'm taking care of Rothy, I retorted, but was unconvinced. In my younger days, family was everything. The thought of working outside was unimaginable. Then, on a day Rothy brought home good grades, Dorothy said it would have been impossible with just you. It's all thanks to me. What's your purpose, even? Aren't you unnecessary? Despite me teaching Rothy most of her language and math, and only helping with home economics homework when I slightly messed up the seasoning in a dish, Dorothy criticized my homemaking skills, especially cooking. You need work. How did you and Harry manage before? I'm doing my best, and everyone has their own way of managing household chores, I said, feeling frustrated. Make sure you educate her properly. Dorothy even started complaining to Harry. Emily is working too. Try to understand a bit, Harry said, trying to reason with her, but it wasn't enough for me. Living together, my relationship with Dorothy steadily deteriorated. With Harry far away, I felt increasingly isolated. One day, I called Harry for advice. Hello, is now a good time? I asked. Yeah, it's fine. What's up? Harry responded. It's late. I've been getting criticized about the housework, and it's starting to stress me out. Sorry, Mom's always been a bit harsh, but she might have a point. Don't worry too much. Just go at your own pace, Harry comforted me. Taking some comfort in Harry's words, I resolved to persevere in my daily life. I spent my days longing for Harry's return. As Harry's absence dragged on due to a solo assignment, I continued to live my everyday life with him. However, during Harry's absence, the pressure of Dorothy's words intensified, and I grew increasingly exhausted from the stress. Dorothy criticized everything I did from morning till night, finding fault in all I undertook. When I made Harry's favorite mixed rice, she coldly remarked, "This is terrible. Who'd eat this?" And if I took even a short break, she would snap, saying, "A woman who can handle her housework has no right to rest." I never had much confidence in household chores. Harry used to laugh off my shortcomings, but in front of Dorothy, they were inexcusable. I think Dorothy's harassment stems from her excessive love for Harry. She seems unable to accept that Harry has left her for marriage. It's a stark reminder not to become such an overbearing parent. One day, after some shopping at the local market, I found Dorothy waiting at home. Yes, unbelievable. Going out to play when Harry's not home. What about the housework? She scolded. I needed a break, a break in this situation with your uselessness. I'm struggling here, I replied. Afterward, I found myself waiting for a call from Harry. I believed hearing his voice would bring me some relief, but what he said was unexpected. Things aren't going well with the projects here, and I've gotten into gambling and debt, Harry confessed. What gambling and debt? How bad is it? What about our life? Rothy's future. I panicked. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. I'll figure it out, just trust me, Harry reassured me. How exactly will you fix it? How much debt? I demanded answers. I'm working on a solution, Harry replied. Despite thinking of Harry as someone far removed from gambling, always sincere and dependable since we met, he never once was late for a date. And after we started living together, he always came home right after work. Whenever I cooked or did laundry, he never failed to express his gratitude. I married him because of his sincerity and earnestness. But during Harry's absence, no matter how hard I tried, Dorothy's criticism never ceased. To think someone useless like me married Harry. I couldn't believe it. Despair swirled in my heart. Ever since Harry started his solo assignment, I endured Dorothy's harsh daily criticisms, and Harry's recent confession only deepened the despair in my heart. His gambling debt problem. And then, Dorothy's relentless condemnations. Unable to endure any longer, I left the house in the middle of the night and sat on a bench in a nearby park, crying. One day, she discovered my secret at dinner. She confronted me with it. You used to work at a club, didn't you? A mother like you working there? How shameful, she berated me. Why do you know that? I asked, shocked. I showed your photo to an acquaintance while talking about Harry's useless wife. They recognized you. Seems you were incompetent even at the club in the past, she continued, relentless in her attack. Fed up with a mother who hardly worked and just played with men, I left home and lived alone. I was struggling financially and worked at a club. It was my past before marrying Harry, a secret even Harry didn't know. I was at a loss for words. I had never imagined finding out about my past work and using that as a weapon against me. She attacked me further. I can't accept a woman like you as my granddaughter's mother. I'll tell Harry and get you thrown out of the house, she threatened. My heart sank further into despair. My marriage to Harry, all my efforts, and our future together, it all felt like it could be taken away by Dorothy's single statement. Contacts from Harry became even more infrequent. I feared that doubts and mistrust were growing in Harry's heart towards me. One night, I reflected on my life in my room, meeting and marrying Harry, the current situation, and the relentless condemnations and attacks from Dorothy. I felt I couldn't take it anymore. I'm at my limit, I muttered to myself. I left the room and walked into the night. The night streets were as dark and lonely as the despair in my heart. Dorothy's words echoed in my mind, my past, my secret, and my present, all targeted by Dorothy's criticism. I sat on a bench in the park at night, looking up at the sky. There were no stars in sight. My heart was equally shrouded in darkness. Suddenly, someone approached. Mom, you're here, Rothy said, sitting next to me and holding my hand. Mom, don't worry about Grandma. You're working hard in an IT company. It's proof of your struggle to live. Thank you, but maybe Grandma has a point, Mom. Grandma is trapped in old values. In this era, no matter what job you've done, you should be proud of it. I'm proud that you worked at a club, Rothy said reassuringly. Really? I asked, surprised. Yeah, because you've always worked hard for our family, no matter the difficulties. Don't be swayed by Grandma's words. I'm on your side. Rothy's words swarmed my heart, and tears fell. Mom, you're working hard in it now. That's impressive enough, no matter what Grandma says. I'm on your side, Rothy said, filling me with gratitude. Her support gave me new hope that I could overcome any difficulty. I took a deep breath in front of the pile of documents in Harry's study. Carefully reviewing each one, I began to unravel Harry's secrets, bank statements, credit card bills, loan contracts. The details of Harry's financial transactions gradually became clear. Why did it come to this? Receipts from gambling venues kept appearing, horse racing, pachinko, casinos. Thinking about how much money Harry had spent on these made my heart ache. Next, I turned on Harry's computer. The password was his birthday reversed. Harry's mailbox was filled with urgent emails from financial institutions and messages from friends demanding repayment. There were also many advertisements from gambling sites. I decided to calculate the total amount Harry had gambled away. The result was a staggering $3 million, far beyond my expectation. Confronted with the sum, I momentarily panicked, but there was no time to despair. I began to plan, securing funds for our living expenses. I calculated the expected amount from selling valuable household items, my savings, plus what I could save from my salary. I continued my investigation, which financial institution Harry borrowed from, and how much, to get details. I contacted banks and obtained credit information in Harry's name. Working tirelessly every day, a few days later, I had a plan. I devised a way to repay Harry's debts and started preparing for a life without relying on leveraging my IT experience. I decided to take on freelance projects. A few days later, I created a portfolio and registered on a freelance job website. Soon after, I received my first client request. This would help with our living expenses. In between work, I reviewed our household budget. I canceled unnecessary subscriptions, cut wasteful spending, and researched budget-friendly recipes. I successfully reduced our daily food expenses, following tips from local mom friends. I tried selling at a community flea market, selling my branded items and in-used appliances. I made a decent income. Weeks later, my freelance activities were going well, and I felt the stability in my income. My bank account now had enough to cover our living expenses. When I got home, Dorothy's belongings were gone. At the same moment, my phone rang. It was Harry. "Are you home already? Did you see our stuff?" he asked. "What do you want?" "Harry and I are starting a celebrity life abroad with his $3 million. We can't live here if we divorce. Want to know our address?" "Lick my shoes first," Dorothy replied. I couldn't help but laugh. Actually, that $3 million is debt. Stop joking. Harry couldn't possibly have that much debt. It's hard to believe, but it's true. In Harry's study drawer, there are transaction records and contracts from banks and financial institutions, credit card bills, and his PC has urgent emails and messages about gambling. If you don't believe me, check for yourself. That's a lie. It's the result of Harry getting into gambling, horse racing, pachinko, casinos. Adding it all up, it's $3 million. I just sent you photos on WhatsApp as proof. Take a look, Dorothy exclaimed. I had no idea about this. He probably didn't want you to know, but the fact remains, I replied. I was thinking about how to handle this huge debt, but I guess I don't have to worry about it now, do I? Dorothy continued. I stayed silent for a moment, then sighed. I had no idea. I don't know what to say. I hung up without saying anything, resolving to start a new life, shocked by Sean and Dorothy's actions, but now I had no choice but to move forward for Rothy and myself. Later, Sean called. I'm sorry, really sorry. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard, almost crushed. But his voice did not quell my anger. How did it come to this? Because of you, our family is falling apart, I retorted. I didn't think it would come to this, but when I decided to go abroad with Mom, I couldn't see a future with you and Rothy, Sean explained. I was dumbfounded by his words. Couldn't see a future? Your carelessness and lack of planning brought our family to this. I know, but it's too late now. I have a promise with Mom, a promise at the cost of Ree's future for your own paradise, Sean confessed. Harry was silent for a while. Did you really love our family? I asked. I did, but now. His voice trailed off, and I heard him crying. Don't hurt us anymore. Rothy and I will live on our own. I'll forget about you, I declared. Sean didn't respond. I could only hear his crying on the other end. I gently hung up. The reason Dorothy mistook assets for debt was a sudden $3 million bill that arrived at home. She mistook the bill for a lottery win, bringing the idea to Sean. Unaware of Dorothy's misunderstanding, Sean thought starting a new life abroad could be an escape for his debt problems, so he accepted the proposal, mistaking a bill for a lottery win. Noticing this, I then started looking for a lawyer, harboring my anger toward Sean. I began preparations for a divorce, claiming compensation and child support. This marked the start of a new life, a life for me and Daisy, independent of Sean. I consulted with a lawyer about the divorce settlement and child support. During this time, Ree and I spent a lot of time together, and she became my strong supporter. She understood my decision and chose to stay with me. Hearing her words, I felt rewarded for the hard times I endured with Sean, and tears welled up. Meanwhile, Harry struggled with their life abroad. They faced continuous problems due to poor preparation and financial issues. After being robbed, they lost their funds and faced further difficulties due to the language barrier. Eventually, they were deported as illegal immigrants. I then had a discussion with Sean through the lawyer. The divorce is finalized. You'll be paying the compensation and child support in one lump sum, right? I asked. Thank you. Now I can finally start a new life, I added. But in one lump sum? Maybe an installment if you couldn't afford it? You shouldn't have agreed in the first place, Sean responded. I insist on a lump sum, I stated firmly. Sean later took on more debt, borrowing from dubious lenders, almost like something out of an urban legend. His whereabouts afterward are uncertain, but that's not my concern. After canceling her rental and being robbed of all her savings, Rothy was forced into homelessness. Upon returning to the United States, Rothy and I started our new life. Life wasn't easy, but freed from Sean, we were able to look forward to the future with optimism. I want to live happily with Rothy, who saved me from rock bottom, working together in cooperation.
What are you even doing in this house? You're practically a parasite. Hey, what are you doing with that? My mother-in-law Scarlett threw my belongings out of the window. I retorted to her seemingly insane action. Huh, don't you talk back to me like that. Please pick them up. Then she held a knife to my throat. Realizing the danger, I couldn't move a step. Get out quickly, or it won't be a joke next time. Understood. If you insist that much, I'll leave. Scarlett, who has been harassing me since we started living together, doesn't know. She doesn't know that I'm the one supporting this house. The fear I had earlier is gone. I even feel like daring her to do her worst. I'll give you a week. Leave within that time. Thank you, I said to her, but I couldn't stop laughing. Realizing I shouldn't be noticed, I quickly returned to a serious face. This will bring peace to the house. Very good. Yes, indeed. How foolish can she be? Without me, this house will be far from peaceful. A hell awaits. Thus, I left Scarlett behind in the in-laws' house and moved to a condominium. She would later come to know the truth, but by then, it was too late. My name is Alexis now. I'm working from home, utilizing my previous job experience. It's been over 5 years since I married Ethan. But are you okay? I'm sorry, I never thought this would happen. I'm just glad you're safe. Alexis, don't think like that. I was in the hospital room, relieved that he was safe, crying without caring about anyone else. The thing is, working in construction, he had an accident and lost almost all grip strength in his dominant hand. When I heard that, I couldn't think of anything. Ah, Scarlett dear. Ethan, are you okay? Scarlett had arrived, but she pushed me aside and rushed to Ethan. It seems she didn't even see me. We weren't necessarily on bad terms, but sometimes she prioritized Ethan over everything. It was one of those times. Oh, Alexis, you're here. I just got here too. Well, whatever. Ethan, let's live together at my place from now. Huh? I let out a strange noise at her abrupt suggestion. Then she glared at me. What? Do you have a problem? No, it's just all of a sudden. Ethan is in this state. I can't leave him to you alone. I was irked by her comment. There was no need for her to go that far. Then Ethan said, Alexis has been doing enough until now, so I'm relying on her from now on, too. Thank you. Hearing his words, I thought I saw Scarlett make a face. I couldn't see it clearly, but she obviously didn't like it. But I couldn't let her win. So, come to the house as soon as you're discharged. You too, of course. It's not like she needed to say that. Leaving everything to her, who knows what would happen? And you'll do all the moving preparations, Alexis. All of it. That's a bit much. That's right, Mom, you should help out too. I wished he had said more. However, Scarlett, probably not wanting to help, ignored his words. I have my own things to do, she grinned wickedly, making sure he couldn't see. It's probably not for anything good. So living with Scarlett was decided. A month later, Ethan was discharged. I was busy with the move, so I asked Scarlett to pick him up. But it was her who told me just to get things ready. Irritated but still tittying up. It's not done yet. Ha, I told you today's the day Ethan gets discharged. Not even here to welcome him. That's because you said, Ethan, I told you right. This woman prioritizes herself over you. That's not true. I know her intention. She's trying to embarrass me in front of Ethan to lower my standing. But I'm determined not to fall for such an obvious plan. Ethan looked at me with a knowing, kind expression. Mom, stop that nonsense. Unseemly. I'm saying this for your sake. That's none of your business. Wait a minute. Scarlett, chasing after Ethan in a panic, was quite comical. It made me laugh out loud. Noticing that, she glared at me with a devilish face. Her glare meant nothing to me. You can just relax at home from now on. I can't do that. I can't use my right hand, but I can't just put all the burden on you. Even so, you just got discharged. I won't feel at ease if I don't do something. Ethan was determined. I had planned to let him relax for a while, but seeing his insistence, I decided to respect his wishes. Maybe start with simple cleaning. It might even be good for rehabilitation. That makes sense. I don't know if this hand will ever be the same, but it's better than doing nothing. But there's one condition. Absolutely no overdoing it. Of course, if I did, you would get mad, right? You're scary when angry. No kidding. He looked normal, just as I had imagined. Well, he might just be acting brave, not wanting to worry me. That's why I decided to work even harder, doing his share too. But I had forgotten about one person who would interfere. Hey, Alexis. Yes. Why is Ethan cleaning? Did you force him to do it? Scarlett only sees and judges based on what's in front of her. She has no idea of the thoughts and feelings behind it. She should try being in our shoes for once. Anyway, you just locked yourself in a room and played all day. It must be nice to only have fun, especially when your husband is— Wait, what do you mean? Looking around, I saw expressions that seemed to indicate I didn't really understand. I couldn't understand the meaning surrounded by strangers. I was being condemned. I wanted to escape immediately. Don't you get it? We don't need you. Less people in this house. I don't understand what you mean. Everyone says. The baffling interrogation continued. They kept insisting on how worthless I was. Continuously hearing this could drive anyone insane. Isn't it time you understood your place? Shouldn't that be your line? You're going to rebel against your mother-in-law. Isn't this a waste of time? How dare you? I was reaching my limit. I didn't want to anger Scarlett further, fearing what she might do next. So I decided to take action. Oh, isn't it about time Ethan comes back from rehab? What is it, that time already? Then the mysterious woman left. I'll come again. Sure, I'll be waiting. Let's talk more. Scarlett and her friend fell for my lie. In reality, he wouldn't be back for another hour. We were just getting into a good part. By the way, who was that person earlier? I finally asked the question I'd been curious about. Oh, that was Johanna, my best friend. I told her about you and she wanted to meet you. I could easily imagine how she had described me, probably as a useless wife who does nothing but play. I thought how pitiable Scarlett was, only able to do such things. That's how it was. By the way, Ethan isn't coming back yet. As I was returning to my room, wait, what do you mean? Just as I said, he's not coming back yet. You lied. You should have realized. What's with that attitude? I decided to say what I wanted. Any further interference from her would be just a nuisance. Weren't you the one who started this conflict? You brought your friend because you couldn't handle it alone. That's it. It's not true. I can handle someone like you on my own. Then please do, if you really can. I boldly taunted her. I thought she would do something by that, and she reacted. Apologize now while you can. I had no intention of doing that. Unable to contain her anger, she grabbed a vase nearby and threw it at me, just like the trash can earlier. I easily dodged it, having anticipated her move. I taunted her further with a laugh. I'm home. Just then, Ethan arrived. Scarlett panicked. Why now? You weren't supposed to be back yet. Oh, sorry, what I said earlier was a lie. He was actually on his way back. Why would you do that? It's obvious, isn't it? Pointing at the shattered vase, I imagined the upcoming scene would be quite amusing. Wow, what happened here? Scarlett threw it at me. What's going on? Her friend visited us earlier, and then I explained everything to Ethan. He looked both amazed and angry. Is that true, Mom? No, I didn't mean. So it is true. Why did you do that? I didn't intend for it to go like this. Watching Scarlett about to cry from her son's anger, I felt like all my troubles had vanished. Well, I have things to do. Okay, wait a minute. Ignoring her, I went back to my room. I believed this would stop her from being mean to me in the future. I never doubted that. Since then, peaceful times followed. However, on that day, having stayed up all night, I ended up napping in the afternoon. Then, sorry to wake you, but could you come here for a sec? Understood. Ethan seemed unusually serious as I headed to the living room. I saw Scarlett there. What happened? Look at this. On the table, there was a broken model kit. It was one of Ethan's hobbies, something he treasured greatly. When I came back, I found it like this. Do you know anything? I don't know. I truly didn't recognize it. This model kit was usually in the former his father's room, but I hadn't been there today. But someone must have done this. I looked at Scarlett. She was the likely suspect. Then she laughed with an expression I had never seen before. It was as if she was possessed by a demon. Then I completely understood. Even if someone did it, I was out. Remember I met you on my way back from Johanna's house? Well, yes. Also, I found this in the room. She was holding a shiny little object. Is this an earring? I checked my ears in shock. One of my earrings was missing. I thought I was defeated. He was completely getting revenge for what happened the other day. This looks like yours, Alexis, and you're missing the left one. I took a deep breath, betting emotional would play right into her hands. Indeed, it's mine, but that doesn't mean I did it. Right, making excuses now. It's unseemly when there's evidence. But still, the fact remains it was broken. Wait a minute. Then he went back to his room. He glanced at me as he left. I felt accused by him and just stood there frozen. Too bad this is the end for you, doing such things. You set me up. There's no proof. If you had listened to me, this wouldn't have happened. I can explain. We'll see about that. And Scarlett's words became reality. No matter how much I explained to Ethan, he wouldn't really listen. Wait, I didn't do anything. I know. I get it, he said and quickly looked away. I heard laughter from behind. See, I told you so. What? No need for sour grapes? I threw myself into work after that. It was like trying to forget reality. 2 weeks passed with hardly any conversation between Ethan and me. During that time, Scarlett kept showing her triumphant face. Feeling down lately. Something wrong. I know you don't mean it. It's too late for that attitude now. She was unusually cheerful today. I had a feeling something bad would happen, and it soon did. While I was cleaning my room, what are you doing in this house? You're like a parasite. What are you talking about? Such a noisy woman. With that, she threw my belongings out of the window. What are you doing? I protested her insane behavior. Don't talk back to me. Pick them up, please. Then she suddenly held a knife to my throat. Realizing the danger, I couldn't move. Don't move. It's better for you. No normal person would go this far, even if they disliked me. She had clearly lost her mind. Leave now, or next time it won't be a joke. Understood. If you insist, I'll leave. I realized any further involvement with her could lead to something irreparable. Fine, you have a week. Leave within that time. Thank you. That was an opportunity. With a week's time, I could prepare various things, and she didn't understand. She didn't know who was really supporting this house. The reason she could live freely and comfortably was because of me. Get your preparations done quickly. I'll start right away, I told her, but I couldn't help laughing. I immediately switched back to a serious expression, not wanting her to notice. It will bring peace to the house. Very good. Yes, indeed. How foolish can she be? Without me, she'll face a hell far from peace. I began preparing for the move right away. The belongings were manageable, but finding a place to live was the first step. And when Scarlett was asleep, I decided to inform Ethan. So, you were told that. Actually, I have something to say too. I shouted in response to the serious topic he brought up. What do you mean? There's a lot to talk about. I'll tell you later. Make sure you do. 3 days after Scarlett's eviction order, I successfully found a new house, and soon the promised week arrived. Today is the day of the promise. You understand, right? Of course. The movers will be here soon. Finally. Oh, where's Ethan? I don't know. He's been out since the morning. Oh well, anyway, the thought of not having to see your face anymore is so refreshing. I'm going out too, so make sure everything's clean. Of course. I saw her off with a smile. Of course, it wasn't a smile from the heart. An hour later, the movers arrived and loaded all the belongings. I then contacted Ethan. Everything's loaded all right. Take care. See you later. I hung up the phone. I wondered what kind of face Scarlett would make when she returned. I couldn't wait to get to the new place when the move was finally completed. What did you do? Scarlett asked. I just moved as I was told. That can't be. Ethan's things are gone too, aren't they? She insisted. That's obvious because we moved together. You're lying, I countered. You want to talk with him. I put Ethan on speakerphone. She clearly hadn't fully grasped what was happening, just as I had planned. Mom, explain this to me, Ethan demanded. I found out that you were behind the model kit incident. Alexis would never do such a thing. How could you know that? Because she gave it to me as a gift. And she wouldn't do something like that, Ethan explained. He was right. I had gifted him that model kit. It was a limited edition, and I had lined up early in the morning to get it. So she was probing you, knowing everything, exactly to see how cruel you were to her. Ethan concluded. Oh my. By the way, from now on, you can manage on your own, right? We'll enjoy our time in a condominium, Ethan announced. What condominium? Weren't you just playing around? Scarlett clearly didn't understand anything. I thought she knew more, but not to this extent. Actually, I've been paying for our living expenses, Ethan revealed. How could that be? When I was at home, a little thought would make it clear, I said. Scarlett was speechless. No wonder, considering she was being supported by the person she harassed. The one who misunderstood everything was Scarlett herself. So, Scarlett, please manage on your own. I'm not working, you know, Ethan stated. Without you guys, you chose to let go, Scarlett protested. It's not our problem. Let's both do our best from now on, Ethan said firmly. Are you abandoning your mother? Scarlett's desperation showed. I'm not doing that. We used to live separately anyway. Bye. Ethan hung up the phone. Both he and I felt refreshed. There was a time I thought we might get along, but I quickly forgot about that given how things turned out. It was her own doing. By the way, why didn't you tell me about Scarlett? I asked Ethan. What about Scarlett? Oh, to deceive the enemy, first deceive your ally, right? Ethan chuckled. We looked at each other and burst into laughter. This will surely bring peace. About a month later, Scarlett called me. Hey, Alexis, I can't do this alone, she admitted. It's only been a month. You've got a long way to go. Keep it up, I replied firmly. It's not that. Let's both do our best. Bye, Scarlett pleaded, seeking a glimmer of hope. But I wasn't going to easily reach out. Ethan had already blocked her calls, so she had no choice but to contact me. No matter how many times she called, I would keep pushing her away. Shall we move this luggage? I changed the topic. Thanks. Could you take it there? Ethan asked, and then he noticed. Wait, is your right hand okay? Oh, yeah. Recently, it started to get stronger, I replied. I was constantly surprised by his recent changes, but I quickly felt happy. Scarlett didn't matter anymore. We were going to focus on our own happiness.